Hey guys, welcome in. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about my 1989 Chevy truck. I've owned this Chevy truck. It's a 1989 year model. My granddad originally purchased this truck used 2 or 3, maybe 4 years old when he originally bought this truck from a local car dealership. And it's been in our family ever since then. I started driving in 1995, and I consider this my first vehicle, and I still own it today. This truck has been through many iterations. It's been raised, it's been lowered, it's been back to factory height, it's run rally wheels, it's run the salad shooter 3-blade wheels. It's been through many different iterations of what it is now. I actually ran into a pole in the middle of a parking lot, dead centered it going to a parts store like in 1997 or 98, and we did have to repaint the truck one time, but this is a factory color. One of the cool things about it is in the last couple of 3 years I did do an LS swap on this truck. So this truck has a 2011 5.3 4th gen LS engine with the 6L80 6-speed transmission. Best thing by far that I've ever done car-wise. I've kind of been a car guy my whole life and watch all the shows that everybody knows, Motor Trend shows, YouTube shows, really just enjoy the whole car scene. And one of the reasons that I wanted to make a YouTube video about this truck is because I really enjoy watching YouTube. I mean, I've got little kids now and I have to watch shows, little clips at a time, because they're doing their thing and I'm trying to interact with them, and I don't want to be that dad that just, sits down and watch TV all the time or whatever. But anyways, I have just a few short minutes at a time. So I wanted to make this video and I hope you guys like it. One of the things that I did do is everybody's got Facebook, and I joined a Facebook group, talking about the LS swap. A lot of questions I had about that, answered those questions, but I just kind of enjoy the research part of trying to figure things out. And I figured it out, and here it is. It's kind of a daily driver by far. It's not a show truck, but 20 feet away it looks good. So just wanted to kind of show you a little bit about this truck. One of my favorite parts about my truck is the LS swap that I did. I did this LS swap a couple years ago. It's probably been 2, maybe 3 years ago now. I'm not exactly sure, but had a lot of time to work on some things a few years ago. I think it was over the winter, and just kind of worked on it in my shop as I had time. And a lot of people, I know that the LS swaps are real popular and everybody's done them, and there's kind of a to some people, to like car enthusiasts, it's like, oh, I want to try something different. Well, I know why everybody does an LS swap. They're fairly easy to put in. They make good power. You turn the key, they start. It really is a good power plant. The 89 truck that I had was a 305. It had over 200,000 miles, and a lot of those miles were teenager and young Kevin driving that truck around, and they were plagued with smog. Just not a good combination. They didn't make a lot of power. The LS engine, when I first started this, I'm pretty well mechanically inclined, but this is the first engine swap that I've done. I joined a Facebook group to ask some questions and look around. There's so much information out there now that it's so easy to look things up. There's companies that make all the stuff that you need. I use Dirty Dingo motor mounts that slide. There's no guide to where you're supposed to put that. I just kind of put it where I thought was best. The transmission cross member, this is a 4th gen 5.3. It is a DOD engine. The transmission is a 6L80E. I'm not sure about the length of it. I don't know if I even got into the length of the 6L80 versus the 4L80 versus I believe this truck had a 700 R4 in it from the factory. I didn't get into all that, but the cross member's flat and it bolts to the rails just on a flat section of the rail. And I put my Dirty Dingos where I thought they should be. For the firewall in the back, for the front with the fans and everything, and just kind of put it where I needed to go. Mounted the transmission to the cross member, drilled the holes up through, drilled new holes up through. Some guys say that they use the factory holes where the transmission cross member goes. It didn't work for me. I did have to drill new holes in, but just kind of put it where I wanted to put it. But it was pretty easy, and things kind of become more self-explanatory as you work on it and as you go through things. And for me, the fun of a project is kind of researching, figuring out how things work. One thing I would suggest is I got a complete donor vehicle. I purchased, I believe it's a 2011 Chevy Tahoe. I bought it from a wrecking yard. The wrecking yard went and picked it up on the side of the interstate one day. It was rolled. The guy didn't have full coverage insurance. No clue why he didn't, but he didn't have full coverage insurance. So the wrecking yard was kind of stuck with it because he couldn't pay the bill or didn't pay the bill. He actually sent them the title for the Tahoe. So I got the title. I purchased it for a good deal. I'm not necessarily going to say what that good deal was because everybody's different. Every location's different. I'm in South Carolina, but I did park that Tahoe out or sold some of the parts. And there were some things I didn't realize, like for instance, I didn't know that on those Chevy Tahoes, a lot of guys are buying the old police Tahoes now. And police Tahoes, they have like the factory, you know, nice front interiors, but the back for the prisoners are just like plastic door panels and like plastic seat or whatever. And a lot of those guys that buy those police Tahoes or Yukons are wanting the door panels, the civilian door panels, they're wanting the back seat. So I sold the back seat and the door panels for like $300 or $400, which was a good deal for somebody that had bought a police Tahoe, but it was a great deal for me because I recouped some of my money. But I've actually still got that Tahoe around because I own a couple Yukons that are similar, and I've been robbing so many parts. One of the parts that I robbed off of that Tahoe that I really used was this core support right here. This core support unbolts from the Chevy Tahoe, and it is the mounting point for the radiator, the fans. I cut this core support, kind of routed it out here on some of the sides to make it where it grafted into the OBS core support. The radiator mounts in the factory OBS locations. It makes it really nice where I reused a lot of these parts, recycled, upcycled the parts where it fits in the OBS. Once I had it grafted in, rattle can, spray paint, I think you really can't tell. One of the things that I wanted to do with this swap is for somebody that didn't know a lot about cars, I wanted it to be able to raise the hood, say, yeah, it's an engine. This could have come in this truck. I didn't want it to be, kind of racy or whatever. I just wanted it to have a factory look like this could have come in this vehicle. And I think I've accomplished that. Here where the factory airbox is, I even use the factory airbox off the donor. A lot of guys use like cold air intakes. I didn't want to hear a cold air intake sucking sound inside the truck. I don't like the looks of them. I grew up back in the day when ricers were a thing. If you're into ricers, great, but I didn't like it. So I wanted it to look kind of factory. So this is the factory air box. I used the factory battery box from the Tahoe, the factory puke tank. So when I took everything loose on the Tahoe, before I took everything loose from my donor motor, I took a roll of painter's tape, like blue painter's tape, and I labeled every single thing you could label. I labeled this hose here for the puke tank, what it was, where it goes, and then I labeled it on the radiator. Labeled everything. Even if it was dumb and I could remember where it went, I labeled it to make sure I knew where everything went back in. I did use the ICT billet R4 compressor for the factory air conditioning. A lot of guys say that the R4 can overspin with LS swaps. I haven't had any problems with it, but the ICT bracket has been nice. I do wish, kind of in a way, that I would have used the sedan air compressor, which the sedan air compressor sits a little bit higher, and I'm not sure I could have used this factory air box, but I don't know. Either way, I've got a brand new R4 compressor here. But this is the under the hood. I like everything, the way everything's turned out here. The only thing I don't like is the way that I mounted the computer, the factory ECU. I just don't like that. I know some of the aftermarket wiring harnesses add length to the main harness where it plugs into the ECU. I had this factory harness cut down, and there's a company in Florida that does this work for me. There's a bunch of companies that do it, but I had a company down in Florida to do it, and I put the link in the description for that company. But they did a good job, and at the time they didn't have a huge backlog, so I sent it to them, and a couple weeks later they sent it back. It was all ready to go. So the wiring harness is easy. There's a local guy that does the computer programming. He put a tune in it just to get it running, got it running. Once we got it running, took it back to him. He rode with me, data logged it, I guess, you know, read the O2 sensor. And after he tuned it, when I was just driving down the road, it was a world of difference. This thing does great. It does really good. So I'm proud of under the hood. This is kind of my proudest point of the truck. But I like the way it turned out. I think it looks good. So if you're an OBS guy, one thing that kind of sticks out first and foremost, if you're looking at the side of this truck, is you'll realize, I've already kind of pointed out a little bit about the wheels. You're saying, wait a minute, Chevy OBSs are 5-lug. These are 6-lug wheels. You're right. So one of the things that I wanted to do, this truck has been through many iterations of different wheels. I've had salad shooters, I've had rally wheels, I've had the 20-inch wheels with the spinners back in the day. But one of the things that I wanted to do is, in my older age, I've gotten to where I kind of like factory wheels, you know, different factory wheels now on Chevy vehicles rather than aftermarket. Everybody in the aftermarket in the last 5 years, 10 years, everything's just gone black wheels. You know, with the diesel trucks, everything's just gone black wheels, and I'm just not into black wheels. I've had diesel trucks with black wheels, you know, don't get me wrong. I love them. But for this style, I wanted something different. So in 1989, from 1989 to I think about 1993 or 94, these trucks had a light duty spindle, which had a smaller bearing for the hub. A lot of newer vehicles have like hubs that are sealed bearings, but these trucks have a inner bearing and an outer bearing, and you pack the bearings, and the bearings all sit in the hub, which houses the rotor. So on this truck, I did do Magaldi lowering spindles from like a 96, 97, the later model OBS Chevy trucks that have the big bearing. And I used the big bearing lowering spindle, and then I used a light duty 2500 Chevy truck rotor and hub assembly. I think it's like you can search like a 1990, 91, something like that, light duty 2500 to get a 6-lug conversion for the front. For the rear, 15 years ago, I was doing research and figured out that, you know, the 10-bolt rear ends, you know, I've had K5 Blazers, and I've had Camaros, and I've had the old cop car Caprices, and a 10-bolt rear end is good if you don't, you know, run a lot of power. You know, they can be built, you know, I get it, but the light duty 2500s came with a semi-floating 14-bolt rear end. So, like I say, 10, 15 years ago, I bought this rear end from some guy that was going to crush a truck, and I bought it, brought it up to my shop, put it at the edge of the woods, and it's been there ever since, until a few years ago when I did this LS swap. So that is a semi-floating 14-bolt. I did do a disc brake conversion on that. There's a company that makes a bracket that fits the semi-floating 14-bolt, and I can link that in the description. But you know, I did use that. I used calipers. The calipers that everybody uses, like they're a dime a dozen Chevy caliper that come on 100 different vehicles. But my 10-bolt that I had under this truck before I did the LS swap, I had the calipers and everything. So I just bought the brackets. I bought the rotors and everything off of Rock Auto or someplace off the internet. and kind of cobbled my own disc brake conversion together. But I'll show some pictures of that I've got when I actually did the swap. But this truck is 6 lug. These are 2007 GMC wheels. I've got a 2007 Yukon that I've owned since 2010 or so maybe, and I like these wheels, and I think they look good with the OBS. I like the square that matches the square of the OBS truck. So this is it. I don't know the exact amount that this truck is lowered. Like I said, I did use the Magaldi lowering spindles, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this truck has the factory springs in the front, but I did cut the springs to get it exactly where I wanted it. I am running like a 1/4 inch spacer on the front that goes in between the hub and the wheel. When I put the wheel on originally, it scrubbed. Scrubbed the lower A-arm, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So I am running a 1/4 inch spacer on that, and it's not hub centric, lug centric, anything like that. It's just a 1/4 inch spacer that I run on the front. On the back, I'm not running any spacer. That's just the 14 bolt. But that's a little bit about the setup. I did do a flip kit on the rear, which is more really than I want it to be. So I've actually bought some shackles, some lift shackles that I'm thinking about putting on here. When I drive down the road, if I hit a big bump, I live in South Carolina and the roads are terrible. So if I hit a big bump, the axle will hit on the passenger side and hit the rail, and I don't like that. I'd like to be able to hit road Atlanta, which will never happen, but hit road Atlanta, hit a big bump, and the suspension be able to ride. And if you guys know anything, I've kind of thought about a lot of the 4-wheel drive guys or King of the Hammer guys use like these bump stops, or even a factory bump stop that's got some kind of padding to it. I don't know, but the way these OBS axles are put in here, the shocks, the way they work, the shocks on the passenger side, if I'm not mistaken, goes back, and the shock on the driver's side goes forward. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the driver's side, actually it's the opposite way. The driver's side goes back and the passenger side goes forward, I think, because of the gas tank. So the driver's side doesn't really hit as bad as the passenger side. But if you guys have got any ideas on that, kind of let me know what you think. But this is a little bit about the suspension. Unfortunately, there is just a couple things about Old Blue that kind of drives me crazy, and one of those is the driver's side door. The 90s model doors are so heavy. I've replaced the pins in these things. I've drilled out and put oversized pins in them. The armrest just comes apart because you have to pull on those things so hard, slam the door, drives me crazy. Interior is a little bare bones. This truck is a Cheyenne model. It came with a vinyl seat and a vinyl floor mat, which I have replaced the vinyl floor mat with some carpet tons of years ago. Also had the driver's seat re-vinyled, but it's still a vinyl seat. It's fun, I guess, going to the lake, being able to get out and get back in a vinyl seat and not have to worry about getting the seat wet. But really wish I had a Silverado cloth seat. Wish there was a company that actually made a seat cover for those things where I could just cover the seat that I've got, but I don't think they do. So with the swap, all my gauges work except for the speedometer. For whatever reason, the 89s, maybe the 90 model that has these moon gauges, the speedometer just doesn't work. The oil pressure gauge works, temperature works, voltmeter. I actually had to add a couple sensors to that and buy a couple additional pigtails, which if you're kind of interested in that, again, that Facebook forum is a huge help in that. But I would like to have my speedometer working. I'm thinking about going with the Dakota digital gauges, but I really haven't decided if I want to justify that much money right now, but it's really something that I'm interested in. Friends, I hope you enjoyed the video. This is just a little bit about Old Blue and how he's been around for a while. I do have some projects coming up that hopefully I'm going to have some more content on. And if you'll hang around to this video, you'll get to see just a quick preview of what's coming next. Well, we found another donor vehicle. This is a 2004, I believe, Chevy Suburban. Picked it up from a neighbor down the street. It does have a few miles. The odometer is showing 327,000 miles. Hey, it runs good. I bought me a cheap Chinese wiring harness. Gonna try to put this in the old K5 Blazer. My wife's uncle has had this truck for many, many years. It's got a wore out 350. Gonna swap it over, make something for the kids to ride down the gravel roads. So stay tuned.